We are in Yaakov, and we're on page 15A4. We're dealing with an interesting case. You'll have a little bit of history going on with this story. It says, Da'am Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana said, Kishachala Rabbi Yishmael beRabbi Yossi. When Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yossi, fell ill, so Shalchu lo, the rabbi sent him a message. And they said, Rabbi, our teacher, Emor Lanu Shanayim O Shlosh Devarim, say 2 or 3 things. Shamarta Lanu Bishum Avich, that you said to us in the name of your father. So the question is that the Maharsha brings up is not, they didn't say to, he says, it's not comparable when somebody says, you already told me something, but we forgot. Is saying, tell us 2 or 3 additional things that your father said that you didn't yet tell us. We don't want a repetition. So, you know how some people say, tell me what did your father say again? We don't want to hear that. We want to hear brand new stuff. Okay, so Shalach Lahem, he sent back a message, Kach Amar Abba. So my father said, Meya Ushmonim Shana, Ad Shlocharav Habayit. 180 years before the second temple was destroyed. Okay, what happened? Pashta Yisrael HaRasha'a. So the wicked empire started to Yisrael started to spread out over Israel, and he says that's referring to the Rashi says it's referring to the Roman Empire. That's the wicked people. If you look at 34, it says Rabbi Yishmael had on occasion related to the rabbis. This is what the Maharsha just said, that he had received various teachings from his father. They were now asking him to detail to them 2 or 3 of these received traditions, stuff that they had not yet learned. Rabbi Yishmael's father was the famous Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta, the author of the historical treatise, the brighter known as Seder Olam. If you want to, we still have that. Actually, it's extant. It's not extant is a word. It still exists. Seder, I believe Seder Olam still. I think it still exists, or something like that, or by that name. It therefore stands to reason that the rabbis were inquiring specifically about matters of historical interest. Indeed, Rabbi Yishmael's reply concerning specifically such matters. So, okay, talking about this. So now the empire takes over, and it took 180 years before the second temple was destroyed. What are we talking about, by the way, historically? We're talking about the Chashmonayim. The Chashmonayim, the Hasmonean dynasty, the Macabees. Okay, so they were in charge of Israel from the time they took over until the Romans took over. It was approximately 200 years. Well, their empire was not really 200 years old. It was falling apart very quickly after the beginning. Okay, after the war, they already started to have, maybe they had 50 years. I don't think they had maybe 100 tops. But then they started to get involved with other people making. They were already assimilating according to history. I don't know how true history is at this point, but there was a lot of problems with the empire, with the Israeli empire, and so they already had. There was a lot of infighting between the Jewish parties. So as a result of that, they had to get the other allies. And what happened was they brought in the Roman allies, who originally were, friendly. They took over Israel, as history says, without firing a shot. They never had to do anything because Astrobulus, I believe is how they call him in English, the Israeli king, Astrobulus, made a treaty to fight Hyrcanus. I believe those are the names. But like I said, it's a strange historical event where you have a civil war going on in Israel, and so one of the Jewish kings goes to Rome to make a peace treaty with them to fight the other brother, and the result is that they take over. So now 180 years, though, they're already doing this, which, by the way, if you think about that, 180 years, that means they're dealing with it for 20 years. Because according to Rambam, there was only 200 years, and they were ruling altogether. That's all it was. So if it's 180 years, and now the evil empire is coming in, Rome is coming in, that means he had about 20 years, according to this.
What, 20 years of
20 years of rule. And that was from the time of the Maccabees taking over from the Greeks, kicking the Greeks out, Syrian Greeks, until the Romans decide to come in. They were invited in, so that is already, it's ridiculous. It's only 20 years of God.
So in other words, the one side wanted to ask the Romans to help them settle their internal squabbles,
right?
And the Romans stuck around until they just took the whole thing over.
Well, yeah, it's like anytime you have an ally, the ally is stronger. The ally think about it's. Sorry. America, Kuwait. I was going to Vietnam personally, but Korea, all these places that we went in and we never pulled out. Germany, England, no, we broke off from England.
No. When they would fight on behalf of other countries, they would do the whole.
Right. So it's when you have an ally, the ally sometimes takes over. Again, you're a pain in the neck to the ally. So why are you bothering me? I can just take you over and you'll pay me taxes and get it over with. Then it says, Shmonim Shana. It was in 80 years until 80 years previous to the destruction of the temple. Gazru Tuma al Eretz Ha'amim. The rabbis decreed the Tuma on the lands of the nations. Why? What is the Tuma from? Tuma's mate. What we call the death of the Tuma, the spiritual impurity coming from dead bodies. Why did they say that the lands of the nations were impure? Because the land of the nations, the non-Jews, just somebody would die, they would bury them there. Unlike the Jews, where we had funeral, we would mark our graves. Why would we mark our graves, by the way? Not because we just want to have a whole gravesite, but why? The Kohanim. The Kohanim have to know where not to step. So, that's probably where we got this concept of graveyards, by the way. Because we want to centralize so that Kohanim could walk around. And that's and the non-Jews will ultimately take that over. Today, was a graveyard, a place that people are just dying to get to. But bottom line is, everybody has a graveyard. Say nobody is just burying in the backyard. Okay. That's pretty much gone.
But that's what used to do.
That person died. Put him in. They say, I don't even know if it's true. I'm just going.
You wouldn't know where to walk then. In many later years.
Correct. They say about the Arabs. I'm not sure if it's Muslim Arab. I'm not sure how they do this, but they say about because of how. Again, I don't even know if it's true. I may be just propagating a myth, but they say that the women, because they were worthless, they weren't because a man. So when they would die, right there, they would just bury them. They wouldn't bring them to anything. So if that's true, then it's a vestige of the old days. But that's really why they said the lands of the nations are tamei, which is why, by the way, I, as a Kohen, could not be fit to do service in the temple today because of the suspected tumas mate that I have just walking around this wonderful land that we have, because who knows where anybody's buried. Yeah.
So that's why the other nations are buried their dead wherever they.
Say it again.
The other nations going and bury their dead wherever they die.
Right.
So was that that's just for people, normal people, but things like the Valley of the Kings, all the Egyptian kings and stuff.
No, the kings would be buried where they.
There's a set place whereas all the Egyptian royalty, most Egyptian royalty has been found in that one valley. Was that?
Yeah. No, again, that's royalty.
Right.
Royalty would have been given a proper burial, which they all had their own burial spots. But when it came to everybody else, again, where do you die? Put you in the ground, or just leave you there to rot, depending on what's going on. It could be a war, so you just left there to rot. Nobody's really going to come back to bury you. But the point is, if you think back to the old, when we were colonizing this, like that, I'm becoming British. When we were colonizing the United States of America, and we go out west. So if you had around the church, you always had the burial spots, or you'd have a private burial spot for the family, whatever the case is going to be. Again, the beginning formations of these, what we would consider graveyards today.
We have one of our dad's friends' father-in-law, I think it's Canada. Anyway, he lives in Pennsylvania and he has a big farm in Pennsylvania. But he was giving us a tour of the wooded area, the woodlands.
Right.
And the neighbor, you could sort of see over the fence line, or was it his property? I
Uh-huh.
forget which, but there was like a private cemetery.
Okay,
The
there you
family,
go. Right.
like 7 generations of that family.
Right, so you have those plots. So that's another part of where I wasn't going to be part of the grandiose plot. But nonetheless, what happens if I don't have that? Again, I'm in the Wild West, somebody gets shot. I have to bury you where you are.
Yep.
Okay, so, and I'm not marking it as the unmarked grave. I'm just burying it because I don't have to worry about Tuma. As a non-Jew, I'm not worrying about Tuma for the Kohen. I never heard of the Kohen. What do I hear of this? Okay, so now that's what happened. Fine. And the al kli zechuchot, and also they declared Tuma on glassware. So what then arbe imshana ad shlo chara habayit. Now 40 years before the temple was destroyed, Galta la Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin moved away from its former seat in the temple precinct, and v'yasva b'chaniyut, and they took a place in a building on the Temple Mount called Chaniyut. Wow, that was going on there. So he says 40 years. He explains in 36 to 39. He says 40 years before the Holy Temple was destroyed, there were signs that portended the calamity to come. The Gemara in Yoma relates that certain miracles that had formerly occurred regularly then ceased. Thus, from that time on, the lot of the Yom Kippur sacrifice did not come up in the right hand of the Kohen Gadol, nor did the red ribbon turn white on Yom Kippur as a sign of forgiveness, nor did the western light of the menorah burn all day. Furthermore, the doors of the sanctuary opened on their own accord, indicating that the enemy would enter easily. It was then that Reb Sadok started his 40-year fast, so that the temple should not be destroyed. Obviously, his fast didn't, well, he certainly got credit for it. It didn't stop the destruction. The Great Sanhedrin, so now what happened? The highest judicial court consists of 71 judges and had its official seat in the chamber of hewn stone, otherwise known as the Lishkat Hagazit, in the temple courtyard. The Great Sanhedrin is in contrast to the Lesser Sanhedrin, each composed of 23 members, which were located in various provincial centers. So they exiled themselves. Okay, the Sanhedrin exiled themselves, and they went to a building in the Temple Mount known as Chaniyot. So that's what they did. So now, why did they do this? So the Gemara says, Lamai Hilchata, as regard what laws does the relocation of the Sanhedrin have any significance? In other words, why do I have to know historically that they moved away? It's a crazy thing to know. So Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Avidimi said, Lomar, to tell us or to teach us, Shalo Danu Dine Knasot, that the Sanhedrin did not any longer judge any cases involving penalty law. What's a knas? You do something wrong, I can give you a fine. Okay, they didn't want to do that. So Dine Knasot. So the Gemara says, I'm just going to run through the case so we can get the idea of what's going on. Dine Knasot Tzalka Diacham. Do you really mean that cases involving penalty law were not judged once the Sanhedrin moved away? And he tells you, in fact, there is no reason why cases involving penalties cannot be judged at any location, provided the judges are formally ordained. So it doesn't mean that they moved away. So the Gemara answers, Ela me'ata, ela ema. Rather, you have to say, Shalodanu dine nefashot. They no longer judged capital cases at any rate. We see from this report that the decrees concerning the lands of the nation and glassware were enacted by rabbis 80 years before the destruction, not by the two rabbis. Rav Yossi said an earlier Braita. Fine. So that's going into what the Gemara is dealing with. But we have that they didn't judge dine nefashot. Okay, so why? And he says capital cases need not necessarily be judged by the Great Sanhedrin. Any provincial Sanhedrin of 23 is vested with the authority to judge them. But there is a proviso that the great Sanhedrin must be functioning at its normal location. Failing this, all other courts lose their authority to judge capital cases. So you understand, we cannot judge as a Jewish court system. We can until the Sanhedrin will be brought back to its Lishchot Hagazit. We are no longer authorized to do capital cases. 40 years before the destruction of 40 years before the destruction of the temple, lawlessness had become rife, and the courts realized that there were too many murderers for them to prosecute. Faced with a situation of not being able to enforce the law, the Sanhedrin said, it is better that we should move away and not be bound to try them. Talk about that, right? Can you imagine the courts here? We can't judge you all, so we're going to stop. Okay. The stipulation of the Sanhedrin's location is derived from the verse, which speaks of a sage who rebels against the Sanhedrin, a capital offense. It says, you shall arise and go up to the place that Hashem your God shall choose. You shall inquire, and they will tell you the word of judgment. You shall do according to the word that they will tell you from that place. The fact that the Torah stresses that place teaches that the Sanhedrin's ruling is dependent on its convening specifically in its usual place. Otherwise, its ruling on capital cases are invalid. Furthermore, the power of the lower courts to try capital cases is not dependent on the Sanhedrin functioning at its usual location. When this great Sanhedrin is not at its seat, the lower courts are also divested of their authority to judge such cases. Okay, and then, so that's number one. What do you see? Again, what the beautiful thing about this is the history you're getting. That it's a very strange history that we're taken out of power so quickly by the Romans, by ourselves actually. Again, our sins did that. The Ramban says, Nachmanides, I always like picking on this statement of Nachmanides. He said the reason that the Maccabees lost their position so quickly was because they were Kohanim. Because they were Kohanim, while it was correct that they rebel against the system and they bring back the temple and they bring back people to Torah observance, they missed the first thing. What was the first thing? Who should have been the king? Davidic line. They're not Davidic line. They're the Levitical line. They're from Levi. Kohanim from Levi. So they're not the Levitical line. Yeah. Kohanim come from Levi.
I know.
Yeah.
For historical, just clearing it up, it's the Davidic dynasty and the Hashmonean dynasty, or the Levine dynasty?
No, it's Hasmonean.
Hasmonean.
It was be called, but I'm saying that from the Levitical line.
Right.
Right. It has Hashmonaim. There was a family I was talking about.
Right, but just to know what the dynasties are called.
Right. The dynasty was the Hasmonean dynasty versus the Davidic dynasty. So, but what I'm saying is they should have said, okay, we have the kingdom back, we brought the temple back, we're right to do that, but now we're going to step back and give the power to whom it should be given to, namely the Davidic line. Let's find somebody from David's line. Really, I shouldn't say Davidic, actually, I should say Shlomo. It goes David Shlomo, because David had a lot of sons. So it really goes David to Shlomo and from Shlomo on. So you'd have to find out, who those kids are. And in those days, it wasn't so hard. People were still identifying by those names. Certainly, I'm going to know who it's only, how far away is it? How far? I mean, I know I'm a Kohen. Rabbi Linda knows he's a Levi. Okay, so it's not that if you're the Davidic line, you're going to know that. We knew that Lubavitcher Rebbe was from the line of David HaMelech.
Really?
Yeah, somehow they traced that back. I don't know how they did it, but they traced it back. They could have it could all just be a lie, I don't know. But they all you have to do is go back to maybe 100 years, and then we have a record.
Is that when we trace that? Is that the father's side or the mother's side?
Yeah, father's side. It has to be father.
Just like
has to be father, son, father, son, father. Yes.
To follow the tribal or family.
Correct. Cannot go through the mother.
Yeah.
That's why, by the way, Jesus can't be the Messiah.
Right.
Because when they try to trace him back, if you look at the Christian scriptures, so Matthew does Matthew talk about it at all? Does Matthew talk about the lineage? Okay. So one of them, I forget who it was. One of them traces it back to God, the virgin birth.
Yeah.
So to say that here, by the way, for all the Christians shut down right now, you don't want to hear what I'm about to say. You ruins your whole religion. Okay. For those who say that's the virgin birth, that means God is the father of Jesus.
Yeah.
If God is the father of Jesus, that means by necessity that he has to be the son of David.
Ah.
So God's not the son of David. God's the father of David. So it's
God.
throw that story out. That story doesn't work. Then they want to say, the second thing they want to argue is, well, Mary is of the tribe of David. Well, I'm happy that I'm not going to argue that. But it doesn't go through the mother, it goes through the father, only the father. Then they want to say that Joseph was from David. Well, I'm glad he was from David, but you
father,
just said
right?
he wasn't the father. So he adopted, just because I adopt somebody as a Kohen, if I adopt a child, a boy, it doesn't make him a Kohen. Okay? So it doesn't work like that. So according to all levels, Jesus is not from David. So he cannot be the Messiah. So that's where this becomes a very important thing, where you want to maintain what the lines are. And again, if I go back just 150 years, whatever it's going to be, I can already know who from David. I can trace it back, which is how they traced the Rebbe back and others. They would know where he is. So if you could trace the Rebbe, which only died in 1980, 90, whatever he died, Zichron Livracha. So then, how hard would it be for the Maccabees? Come on. Go get somebody from David's line, Shlomo's line, put him into place, have a good day, do your job. But they didn't. So Ramban says that's why they lost. That's why they kicked out of power. They were great. If not for them, we would have lost the whole Torah. Good. But what they messed up on was, absolute power corrupts absolutely, if you will. So they didn't give it up. And then what happens? They lost the whole kingdom. But it's just a fascinating part that the Torah, that his father is saying 20 years into their reign, it was already over. The Romans were already coming in. Okay. Then it says, and it's I have to figure out what there is here. It says, so you go a little more down, and it says Hillel v'Shimon, Shimon ben Gamliel. Hillel v'Shimon, Gamliel v'Shimon, Nahagu Nisyutan v'Nei Abayit Me'ashana. They're skipping a little more there, okay? And then it says that Hillel and Shimon, Gamliel and Shimon had their presidency, or whatever they want to translate that. How they want to say that? Held office as Nasi for 100 years while the temple still existed. So what does he want to say there? Hillel took office 100 years before the destruction. The office passed directly from father to son for another 3 generations. After Hillel came his son Rabban Shimon, and then his son Rabban Gamliel, then his son Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, who was one of the 10 martyrs shortly before the destruction. These 4 Nesiim spanned 100 years. The aforementioned Rabban Shimon could not be confused with his grandchild, who carried the identical name and who was Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, encountered many times in the Mishnah. By the way, if I remember correctly, Hillel was from David. Okay, so that's because that's why he was a Nasi. So what they should have done was made a Melech. He was 100 years before the destruction. From the Roman destruction, 70. 70.
Like you said, David had a lot of children, so was he?
So Shlomo. That's why he was Nasi. So here you already know that is Hillel. So the question is, why didn't they put to him or some? Well, again, that wouldn't be the first 20 years. It would be 100 years. But I'm saying if they knew who Hillel was, they knew he's from the tribe, and we identify him that way, they should have gone the other way. They should have done it. Okay, now here I don't know why it goes backward. It goes to 14. So if you you have to go to 14b5. You're on 15. Now you have to go back to 14. You're Dalet. You just keep following. Okay, so it's 14b5. I feel like I'm calling out what is it called? Bingo. 14b5. Okay, And what we have is, where is it? Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. You have it? Where it says, the Gemara posits that's a decree on hands, long preceded Shammai and Hillel. Okay, so it says, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. You have it? You should have it right there. Good. Okay, good. Bishar Shatikain Shlosha Eruvin. I'm sorry. Bishar Shatikain. At the time that King Solomon was Shatikain Shlomo Eruvin on Yoshidayim, the time that King Solomon instituted, I can't read English today, the laws of Eruv and rinsing the hands, Yatzta Batkol v'Amra. So a heavenly voice went forth and said, Beni im chacham libecha, my son, if your heart is wise, yismach libi gamani, my heart shall rejoice too. Chacham beni, smach libi, be wise, my son, and make my heart glad. Veshiva chorpe davar, and I will answer something back to whoever disgraces you. So we see that it was King Shlomo who decreed the tomb of the hands. That's number one. Again, we're in the middle of you have to understand something, we're in the middle of a story, but of a Gemara, talking about decrees. And they were saying something else. So now you had to wash your hands. So they're saying, but wait, it was done in Shlomo's time. But again, we're not interested in, the Ein Yaakov is interested only in the Agadita portion. They're not interested in the whole argument of that's going on. So you just have to remember that. So he explains that King Solomon is known to have instituted ordinances to help people avoid transgressions. As is written, "V'yoter shahaya kohel chacham od l'meida'at et ha'am v'izen v'chiker v'tikein mishalim harbe." And that's from Kohelet. And it says, besides being wise, Kohelet, another name for King Shlomo, also taught knowledge to the people he listened and sought out and arranged many proverbs. The Gemara in Eruvin takes the word ozen to mean he made handles, because an ozen, well, besides being an ear, is also the word for handle, and a denominative of ozen, handle. Fine. The Gemara, by the way, when you're learning, I remember when I first was learning Mishnayos, and I came to the Mishnayos of Kalim. Kalim is a long treatise, and there's no Gemara to it. It's just all Mishnayos. Maybe in Yerushalmi they may have it, but certainly not in the Bavli. And it started talking about Yadot. And I was thinking, what do hands have to do with vessels? Yadot, Ozen, they use body parts to describe the parts of the vessel. And so it's Yadot, Ozen, Aznayim, and you have to realize it's only when you look at the commentaries that it says we're talking about handles. But otherwise you think, what has to do with the other? But so that's why they have to bring this up, that ozen doesn't mean ear. That's how we call it, ozen, aznayim. Right. So this really means handle. So the Gemara there expounds the verse as follows. Initially, the Torah was like a basket without handles, in other words, difficult to carry. Till Shlomo came and made handles for it, namely his ordinances facilitated observance of the Torah, just like handles facilitate carrying a basket. So, 1, King Solomon enacted the law of Eruv, which prohibits transferring an object on the Shabbat from one person's dwelling to another's, unless a procedure known as Eruv Chatzerot, which is an Eruv for courtyards, is performed. So Eruv consists of taking a loaf of bread owned by both parties and depositing it in one of the dwellings. The prohibition was instituted as a safeguard against the biblical injunction of transferring from private domain to a public domain. Now, do you understand what that means? Just to understand how Eruv works. Okay, in other words, we have an Eruv in South Bend. Yes, everybody can walk around, carry their keys if they need, or whatever they're going to do. You can't carry something that's muksa, but something that's not muksa you can carry. Fine. You see door. How does that work? Tell us about. How does that work? What happens is we join. Okay, besides putting the rope up. That's the simple part. But now we have to we have to join in with each other. So let's assume for 1 second that we're in Eretz Yisrael and there's no non-Jews in the area. It's all Jews, all observant Jews. Okay? Everybody's following the Torah, no problem. We all live in this thing, and we encircle it. We have but we're all owning pieces of the land. We all have our own properties. Okay? So what we do is we put this rope around. And then we take a challah. We want to eat with each other, right? We want to carry. So we take challah and we deposit it in somebody's house, or the easiest place is the shul, because that's central. Everybody's going to go there. And then we're all going to partake of that, in theory. Okay? That's what allows us to join. Now, what we do here in South Bend is you buy the, quote unquote, buy the property from the governor or whatever, mayor, whatever. You give him a token amount of money, and then we're buying out the property from everybody. So really, we own everybody's property. Okay? In other words, the non-Jews to just living on our property, theoretically. It's all theoretically. I mean, obviously, I can't go to Bill and say, "Hey, Bill, give me the keys to your house," because it's not his mind. Doesn't work. Okay, he can say no, but and I can't bring him the quote for the 25 cents I spent. Okay, but let's say I was in a hotel. The same thing. Yeah, I'm in a hotel, and I'm having a convention, Torah Masorah convention, tremendous. They have to make an Eruv. They have to.
Within one building.
Yeah, I'm in one building, so you can say, I'm surrounded with walls, leave me alone. Yeah. No, we all have separate rooms. So we have separate rooms. I can't carry my keys from my room to downstairs because I'm going through a public area, namely the hallway. Okay, so I have to make an Eruv for that system. I deposit, we're all eating together, blah, 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 blah. Okay, but that's how, so he instituted that, because otherwise you couldn't eat together, you couldn't carry. So that was what he did. He wanted to make it easier for people. That is, and then he talked about hands. That is, he enacted that one must perform the Netilat Yadayim, rinsing one's hand, in order to cleanse the hands of their tumah before touching any consecrated food. So we see that Shlomo had already decreed that unrinsed hands are tameh as regard consecrated foods. And so, fine, and then Hashem agreed to everything. And so he says, according to Rav Hai Gaon, it is no mere coincidence that these ordinances were enacted by Shlomo and not by any of its predecessors. A Mishnah at the end of the first chapter of Eruvin teaches that in an army encampment, one is exempt from observing the laws of Netilat Yadayim and Eruv during the exigencies of war. Since until Shlomo's time, the Jews in Israel were in a state of war, Rav Hai claims that the time was then inappropriate to legislate these laws. It was only during King Shlomo's era when peace reigned over Israel that these laws could be imposed. Okay. So what happens? The Gemara says, "So Ata." Right? No. Sorry, not there. Where are we now? We have to go. This is interesting. Okay, so now we have to go to 14a. Yeah, 14a 4. Okay, so you're going backwards here again. 14a to finish this part off. 14a. Whoops. Thank you. 4. Yeah, and we're looking at is Im Chacham Amarav Parnach Amarav Yochanan, the one who grabs the Torah. Oh, it's at the bottom of the page. You have it? Says the Gemara explains the reason. 14a, see it? Mishum Rebbe Parnach. Okay? So here, this is interesting, how he's weaving this together is all because, by this I can put together for you. He said, Erevin, then he says Netilat Yadayim, right? So now he goes to this one. Talking about Netilat Yadayim, it's talking about washing your hands. So now we're going to talk about something again, which would be with the hands. Okay, good. Rishon Rabbi Parnach, the tumah of the hands was legislated on account of the following statement of Rav Parnach. The Amar Rav Parnach, the Amar Rav Yochanan, Ha'oche Sefer Torah Arom. Whoever holds a Sefer Torah when it is bare without a covering, Nik Bar Arom will be buried bare. Ooh, a nice curse for you. So Rav Parnach's admonition teaches that it is forbidden to hold or touch a Sefer Torah directly without a covering, intervening cloth, or the like. To touch a Sefer Torah with bare hands is regarded as disrespectful because they might not be clean. The exact meaning of Parnach's malediction about being buried bare is explained by the Gemara. In order to strengthen the prohibition against touching a Sefer Torah, the rabbis decreed that if someone does so, his hands are rendered tameh, just like the scroll itself, and so as in the previous Braita. The hands remain tameh until they undergo a rinsing in the prescribed manner, namely the way we wash before bread. Although Rav Parnach mentions explicitly only a Sefer Torah, his interdict applies to all the Holy Scrolls. Indeed, a Mishnah in Yadayim teaches that all the Holy Scripts render hands tameh on contact. The reason they didn't want us to touch it was because we have oils on our hands. It could potentially wipe out God's name, which would be the problem. You don't want to do that. Okay. Which is why when you're kissing the Torah, people do it. I mean, if you notice, I never kiss the Torah. Right? I look in, I say the bracha, and which is what all you have to do. You don't have to take your talus and kiss it and scrape the pavement. People go, they're going to ruin the Torah. But people, is what they saw and what they did, and it is so bad for the Torah scroll itself. That's why the rabbi said, "You touch it, your hands are tongue." Stop! Don't touch it. They didn't want to ruin it. So some poskim disagree with this position on Tosfot. These poskim contend the Rav Parnach's prohibition applies only to a Sefer Torah, and that one is permitted to do other holy scrolls such as Megillas Esther. Why Megillas Esther? Because there's no mention of God. God is not said any one time in all of Megillas Esther. So even if I scrape it, I ruin it. So what? I can always fix it. So I didn't destroy the thing. Okay. So Darchei Moshe, the Ramah states that although the common practice is to be lenient, nevertheless it's proper to follow the stringent view. Another point of contention among the poskim is whether one is allowed to touch Holy Scroll immediately after rinsing one's hands, since poskim are of the opinion that in deference to the sanctity of these scrolls, touching them is forbidden under all circumstances. The Ramah compromises him, rules leniently in the case of other scrolls, but not the Sefer Torah. Be all this as it may, all opinions agree that the imposition of tumah on hands that touch the scroll applies in all cases. All types of holy scrolls, not necessarily Sefer Torah, and even to the previously rinsed hands. The decree is all-encompassing and includes even cases where the actual touching of the scroll was not forbidden, according to most opinions. Rav Parnach's interdict, is that how you say interdict? Interdict, D-I-C-T. Yeah, okay. Applies only to the actual parchment of scrolls, but not to their rollers, which may be held with a bare hand. However, some people, if you watch them try to pick the Torah, they'll use their talus and put it on the wood. That's ridiculous. Why am I doing that? It's going to slip. What you do is you can hold that. That's why we have 8 schayim. That's why we have the wood, so that we can roll it and pick it up, not touching the actual.
You could theoretically just have the scroll by itself, right? But then you'd have to touch it.
Right, and your oils on the hands would kill
like the Megillah.
Right, and your hands would kill it.
Yeah.
Right, so you don't want to do that. So the Gemara says, with all that background, so the Gemara says, "Arum salchadach." Do you really think that you'll be buried naked if you, in other words, without shrouds? Is that what's going to happen? So Ritva questions why this should be considered an unduly severe punishment. On the contrary, it seems most fitting. in the mode of measure for measure. He therefore suggests that to be buried without shrouds is hardly a punishment at all, since it can serve as an atonement, as it says, you shall return to dust. So the Gemara says no. Ela Amar Rav Zera Aron below mitzvah. Rav Parnach meant that he will be buried bare without any mitzvah. In other words, he will die bereft of all his merits. Below mitzvah tzakadata. Do you really think he meant without any merits at all? Is the sin of touching a Sefer Torah behind is so great that the person should forfeit all of his mitzvahs on account of it? Elaim, or rather say that Rav Parnach meant that he would be buried aron below ota mitzvah. He'll be buried without this particular mitzvah that he was performing at the time he held the Torah scroll barehanded. In other words, for instance, he was studying from the scroll at that time, he forfeits the merit of that study. Or if he was holding the Sefer Torah while it's being rolled up after being read in the synagogue, generally regarded as a very great mitzvah, he loses the merit of the mitzvah if he touched the parchment at the time. Okay, so that is the end of that part. And then we have to go back. We'll have to stop here. But let's just mark it, please. In